That's the way they all became the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. That's the way they became the Brady Bunch.
Interpret you correctly is a sacred science, one that is not profane, that we sort of have right now in the mainstream thought for the most part. And so the call for sacred science, I think, is what is needed to apprehend non-human or transhuman laws, bring those laws down to this plane, and use them in a scientific manner, in an applied, practical manner. And I can't say right now how that might manifest, because it could manifest in so many ways. But the more that we see that, the better a culture, society, or whatever is going to be.
Just mentioning Aurobindo really quickly. Wasn't he said something to the degree that where the rational mind is it has limited faculties, and it's more similar to the animal in that it can only see a little bit ahead of itself. It can only kind of piece things together. But the higher dimensions of mind already they unify already, and they have access to that higher consciousness. So it's a matter of, I guess what we're asking for is, this scientific rational mind has to in some way open up to these higher faculties that he or she actually possesses, or is more like a vessel for. So it's almost like a halfway house, really, between this highly developed rational being and the discovery of this spiritual being within him or herself that's already there, and learning to make a science, kind of like make a synthesis. I imagine at first it won't even look similar or anything like more spiritual text. It'll probably be trying to, like we're doing now, we're trying to interpret the spiritual into the secular, and we're saying stuff like, oh, near-death experiences is just some kind of release of the brain firing or something like that. But after a while, I think maybe we'll slowly and surely begin to open up to these other dimensions. I don't know, what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been historical examples of this, right? I think Matt was saying this earlier, that there have been some scientists in the past who have also been mystics as well, and they've incorporated what their experiences of those domains have been. Pythagoras is another example of a person who knew the science of the soul and could apply it. He was said to use the vibrations of his own soul to heal other people's souls. And I think that it gets into a science as well, but there are greater and lesser degrees of that and how to apply it. And also you have magic and all the rest of that stuff that starts to come into play, which if you study Manly P. Hall's work, the examples of magic in history, and especially texts, and it gets to be a kind of science as well. But I think we need to go further than that. But Matt, I would like to hear like some of your studies in the Hermetic sciences and some of the figures like Paracelsus.
Paracelsus, I haven't really studied very much, but Jacob Burma I've been taking a very close look at, and I think he says something about language that I think is significant. And Burma says something about it that in relation to what we were talking about earlier, in the way that there are really two kinds of language. There's descriptive language that tries to represent something that's supposedly other than itself. So you're dealing then with a separation between words and things, whereas originally, when language was more like song and poetry, the word was the thing, right? Like Kurt was saying before. And I think when Burma is sort of trying to recollect these experiences he has of higher planes, when he puts them into language, he prefaces that by saying that don't think of these words as a representation of something other than themselves. Read the words and the experience that they evoke as you read them is what they mean. So he's trying to point to this truth that there really only is. And language can make it seem as if we're able to step outside of that direct experience and not be always in an immediately or as Barfield calls it, a directionally creative relation to reality. As we speak, we create the world. We don't try to describe a world that already exists before we speak.
Yeah.
So it's, in that sense, language is not only a high magic, but a form of art. And I think art in general, and especially language, is how it's really the only tool or method that we have to try to bring the higher dimensions into this realm, to make it as it is above, below.
The famous
art or any form of articulation, especially speech, is nation of the word, in matter and on the earth. And so that's sort of the way that a mystic like Burma would look at the task of the mystic, or even of the philosopher. We're trying to speak in such a way that certain worlds are made possible and other worlds are made impossible. And hopefully the worlds we do make possible are good, true, and beautiful, as opposed to,
Isn't that the
opposite?
Sorry, Kurt.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I don't know how to tell this. I forget when I thought of it, but so each of these language sets or world reality tunnels are us. You can view existence as like a piano, and each science plays a certain note, and the note affects how you can manipulate reality. Like all these systems allow you to manipulate reality. Magic lets you view reality in a certain way and do things to it, but it's just an artificial overlay of divisions, that you're using for the tool. And science does that same thing. And so each system is sort of like a song, and when some of them are out of tune, like if you get into, in my opinion, something like where you have fundamental religion thing, it's a way of viewing the world, but some of the keys are off, so it's not forming like harmonics, because it's got things that are sort of in disagreement with itself, and the song doesn't resonate very well. But when you have science, it's a certain melody and it works very well, and sometimes it doesn't pair well with mysticism because it's a different key. But when you I think what we're doing now is trying to cut and paste bits from each song into a new sort of harmonic resonance as a way of viewing and manipulating the world. Combining the parts of science and the parts of mysticism is kind of like creating a new song out of two old ones.
Right.
Trying to make
or a universal language.
Yeah.
I think it also it begs us to question how much we are, when we, the group mind, or however you want to put it, is at its best. It is channeling. I mean, John James, the time to manifest and to let that flow through you, to let those divine forces flow through oneself as much as possible, to channel it, and to know that when we are at our best, when an artist is at their best, they're really doing that, not letting themselves get in the way as much. And I would agree that magic and science are both manipulative, and that's part of the issue, is that manipulation is never going to resolve itself in a natural manner. I feel like it's always a synthetic.